And if you're like, I don't know what y'all are talking about, I've never taught my dog anything in my entire life. And obviously, I don't do anything with my dog. Learning is always happening. So you have taught your dog a lot of things. You may just need an outside observer to say, like, here are the skills that I already see you demonstrating.
Mhm.
They may not feel like skills to you because they may just feel like how you live your life.
Welcome to Enrichment for the Real World, the podcast devoted to improving the quality of life of pets and their people through enrichment. We are your hosts, Allie Bender.
And I'm Emily Strong.
And we are here to challenge and expand your view of what enrichment is, what enrichment can be, and what enrichment can do for you and the animals in your lives. Let's get started. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Enrichment for the Real World. And I want to thank you for rating, reviewing, and subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts.
In this episode, Ellen and I talk about the quirks of Basenji heat cycles, how our therapists keep telling us stuff we tell other people all the time, and how a really basic definition that Ellen and I learned when we were newbies in this profession absolutely blew our minds now that we're seasoned pros. All right, let's get to it.
I had a moment with Griffey's vet wrap the other day, and it hit me that sometimes the challenge isn't learning something new, it's using what you already know in a different situation. Have you ever felt like that?
Oh, you mean like when Miley went through her big girl heat cycle and overnight became a resource guardy little diva. And I was like, well, poop. Now I have to deal with resource guarding with my perfect little puppy. And then I was like, wait a minute, she's got a recall queue. What happens if I just call her back to me every time she tries to like roll up on Copper? And I was like, oh, look, that worked. Who knew? You mean like that, Ellen?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Instead of going into the spiral, you're like, "Oh wait, we both have skills." So
Yeah.
today we're going to talk about the power of applying skills that you and your pet already have in a new scenario instead of panicking like Emily and I did, thinking that you need to acquire new skills in an already stressful moment.
I mean, I think this is a really important thing to talk about because so often when people encounter a new pain point, they're like, oh God, now I have to do a new thing. I have to start over again. Now we've got to do training all over, like more training. And it's really important to remember that, like, whether you're a pet parent who's struggling to adapt to a new behavior challenge, or you're a pro feeling pressure to always have the newest protocol and know all of the different training things, it's just really important to pause, reflect, and leverage what's already in your toolkit. Because there you've got stuff in your toolkit. I guarantee you do. More often than not, you don't need to add more things to your toolkit. You just have to learn how to utilize what you already have in multiple contexts.
Yeah. So by the end of this episode, we're hoping that you'll be able to spot opportunities to reuse your skills, make small, meaningful adjustments, and feel more confident in your ability to tackle new challenges without having to start from scratch. Because you know when's not the time to start from scratch? When you're panicked.
Yeah.
That's not the answer.
Panicked or just sad. Like, I was shocked at how sad I was when Miley started guarding. And I remember berating myself because my first thought was like, oh no, I have a perfect puppy and she's not perfect anymore. And then my second thought was, Emily, that was a really gross thought. Like, that's a lot of pressure to put on a dog to be perfect. Like, let her do her thing. And then the third thought was, but I don't want to have to do a bunch of training. And then the fourth thought was like, no, wait, we've got this. We do this for a living. We teach people how to do this. We can do this. So, like, I went on a whole emotional roller coaster. And if I'm a podcast host talking about this topic and that happened to me, I could guarantee you that it happens to a lot of other people too.
Yeah. Mine was not unlike yours. The only difference was somewhere in there I had a flashback to a client that I work with. This is maybe one of the grossest and best like reviews that I've ever gotten was find somebody who isn't also going to vomit about your dog's behavior to keep you grounded. And so as I'm in this moment having a panic that we'll talk about in a minute, I was like, Yeah, I wasn't gonna vomit over your dog's behavior, but I might vomit over mine.
That is simultaneously gross and delightful.
It
I
was
don't
the grossest, nicest thing anybody's ever said about me.
yeah, I don't know your client, but I love your client.
You do know my client.
Oh, I do?
Mhm.
Okay, well later
I'll
I'll
tell
have
you
to
later.
yeah, I
Yeah.
was gonna say I'll have to get the tea on who said that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So, as we already alluded to, many of us assume that we need new tools or tricks or a new course to solve every problem, that there's a specific tool for every specific problem, that we just have to figure out what is the tool. I worked in zookeeping. I love my Leatherman, which is a beautiful multi tool that got me through most of the day to day stuff. So, we overlook the power of generalization using what we already know in a new way. Sometimes it's not even in a new way, it's in the exact same way that you intended to use it originally. It's just at a new time or a new place.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's a really important uh I think let me say I said it, but I should specify the ability to generalize with tools and strategies that you already have in new contexts is a really important skill to have because it saves you so much time and stress. And for behavior professionals, it saves you a lot of money on like hoarding CE that you may not need and burnout from like constantly feeling like you're not enough and you have to keep collecting new protocols and that feeling of like dependency on external guidance instead of just relying on your internal database of like what you already know. There are so many reasons that this is a really important skill.
Yeah, so back to the vet rep story. A couple of weeks ago, Griffey had to go in for blood work and they got the blood and that was all great, but they needed to put some vet wrap on it, a compression, because they didn't want it to bruise or do any of those things. And
Mhm.
it needed it. And for those of you that don't know, when we have to do something really invasive, particularly something painful for Griffey, he needs to be sedated. It is the best path for everybody involved. And when he is, depending on the way that he comes out of that sedation, he can be what we call a little spooky, where he isn't fully cognizant, he isn't fully aware, he's a little bit more hypervigilant, he's more sensitive to sights, sounds, tactile, all of the things. He just sometimes it's very smooth, other times we keep the muzzle on until he is very, very cognizant, can do all of his behaviors and do all of the things. And so he was in that spooky area, and we really wanted to get the vet wrap off to make sure that it wasn't compressing too tightly. And I was stressed
Yeah.
about it because I knew that he was in that kind of sensitive space. If I had full control over the situation. He was not in a condition under which I would typically do handling of him. I did not want to have to restrain him for this because I knew that that was not going to go well. And so I'm sitting there staring at my dog, who's a little wibbly wobbly, who's looking a little sus of me, which is fair because
Yeah.
go back to the episode we did about what we can learn from horror movies. I was staring, being creepy, holding my breath like Michael Myers.
Yeah.
I was being sus. And I thought, okay, we could do this. We could do this, right? Fine. So I took a big deep breath and thought about, if I was to coach a client through this, what would it look like? A client
Mhm.
with the skill sets that Griffey and I have. He has skills to wear his muzzle under pretty much any condition I can possibly think that I would throw him under. So the muzzle wasn't going to add a problem. He still had it on. He knows how to eat from the ground and snuffle and forage in the muzzle, which is a skill that I am eternally grateful that we taught him to do. He is able to we've taught all of these predictor cues, which I think we talked about predictor cues in Sarah McLeodry's Care with Consent episode.
Yes.
So I will link that in the show notes. But I have all of these ways to tell him what is about to happen. And I also, on the human end of it, have the skills to be able to use one hand pretty well without looking at what it's doing and have my eyes on my dog and my other hand feeding treats at the same time. Which,
Mhm.
like, I'm going to tell y'all, that takes a lot of brain power.
Mhm.
That's a skill that we had to work on. It was not a skill that I was going to be able to acquire under those conditions. And so with that, I was able to use all of the predictor cues. I was able to do scatter feeds on the ground while he was in his muzzle. We did not have to restrain, and I was able to unwrap that vet wrap and then move on, and he got some barbecue
Mm,
for being a good boy. Had I not taken a pause to say, what are the things that we have already worked on throughout his existence? What are pictures that we can kind of map onto this? It would have been a very, very different experience and very stressful for everybody in the house, which is
yeah.
too much.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's a great example of just relying on what you've already got instead of adding a new thing. And it was a similar situation with Miley. Like we were out at the Olympic Peninsula for 8 or 9 days, and we had to take Miley with us because she's not ready to be left alone. We couldn't take Copper with us because he's almost 17. He can't handle car rides, they hurt too much. It would have been really disruptive and uncomfortable for him. And so we had our pet sitter take care of Copper and we took Miley with us. And it was just the world's worst timing that 2 days into our trip, Miley started her big girl heat cycle. And I didn't know this about Basenjis because I raised boxers. And then like, as a vet tech, I've worked with other breeds, but I did not know that Basenjis have their like a 6-month-old. They call them. It's really cute. Fakey heat cycle. That's just like ta-da! I have reached the age of breeding, right? And then they have their real heat cycle in autumn, and they only have one heat cycle a year, which is odd because most breeds have every 6 months they have a cycle. But Basenjis have an autumn cycle. Had I known that, I might have tried to take measures, but I just didn't know any of this. So her heat cycle just completely blindsided us. So she's by herself with the two of us, getting all of our attention, going on exciting adventures with us. And we got home from our trip, and I thought she'd be so excited to see Copper because they're like BFFs. And no, the first thing she did was guard us. And then she started guarding food and objects from Copper, and then she started guarding locations from Copper. And my heart broke into a bajillion pieces. And then I went through that roller coaster and I came out the other side and I was like, we've got this. Like, first of all, we'll do the same thing that we did with when Copper was guarding from her. They enjoy playing outside together. So we'll prevent interactions except when they're outside and rebuild that relationship. So they're getting opportunities to play and they're not getting opportunities for conflict. So that was no one. We're rehashing a skill we already have and something we've already done. And the second, like I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the episode, what would happen if I just call her away from Copper when she rolls up on him all tough? And it worked. I called her away. She got really wiggly and loosey goosey and came back to me. And what's adorable is that what she's started doing over the past few days is she'll start to have a big feeling about Copper. I'll see her little hackles go up and she does a little, like a little growl. And then she looks at me and she's like, and she gets like loosey goosey, like, oh, wait, I don't have to do this thing with Copper. I can just get playful and mom will squeal because I'm adorable. So it was pretty nice being able to navigate something that I was not expecting that kind of just came up overnight very, very quickly and easily using the skills we already had. I will say she has also started becoming like leash reactive to larger dogs when we're out. And we'll probably have to work on that too. But the main thing for me was that guarding part. So I'm sure in future podcast episodes, I will regale everybody with tales of our progress on Miley's leash reactivity. But for now, like the big thing was like, please don't guard. Please don't be a jerk to your best friend who's also a very old man. Like, come on, cut him some slack. So we got that. We're making really good progress with that. And it's just using skills that we already had, playing outside and recall inside. That's it.
And you make good progress.
We're making great progress. Yeah.
Because solid foundations are going to get you farther than really specialized single-use tools.
I don't know how many times we collectively, you, Allie, and I have said this, but we just got to keep quoting Ken Ramirez. Advanced training is basic training done really well. And that really applies to this episode.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, so Ken Ramirez, the incredible trainer and behavior consultant we're talking about, also is on the podcast. I'll link that show in the show notes. Um, teaches on positive reinforcement snake avoidance training. And so my partner was in the class and they're going through and people are asking, so what about with this scent? 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 And when you are learning about generalization and you start to see, oh, yeah, Ken just said that it's the same for like 19 things. It means that you're able to switch the way you view it. And instead of saying, well, what do I do about what the thing, the question can become, I have this thing. What can I use?
Yeah.
And when you do that really small mindset shift, you can get really creative with the things. And so the shortcut in my household when we're stuck in what we think we need something new is to say it also works with porcupines. And
Yeah.
that's just the shortcut that my partner and I are able to say, like, we probably already have something here. And
Yeah.
it may not get us all of the way, but if we're talking about like replacing the garbage disposal, for example, I don't need to know how to replace a garbage disposal. The skill that I need to pull out that I do have is finding information. I'm very good at finding information.
Mm-hmm.
It also works with garbage disposals. It also works with learning how to quilt. It also works
Mm-hmm.
with fact checking something. I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe go learning about once a year heat cycles and Basenji's and why that's a thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. I'm going to forget that that is interesting at the end of this.
I don't blame you. The only reason I care is because it's relevant to my life. Otherwise, I would not care about that.
Yeah. 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 So I think the important part of that is generalization is a skill. It is a thing that we can learn. And we in dog training world make jokes all the time about generalization is hard. But when we stop and pause and think that generalization in itself is a skill,
Mm-hmm.
we can take a different route with ourselves and our clients and our pets and say, I don't need to generalize all of these different skill sets. What happens if I teach the skill of generalizing?
Yeah.
And then I can plug it in repeatedly through a system.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, that's like half of what we're doing in Pet Pro with our mentees. It's like they're like, I have this situation, I don't know how to handle it. I'm like, yes, you do. And they're like, I do. Like, yeah, use the enrichment framework. And
Mhm.
they're like, but it's not for an animal, it's for myself. And I'm like, yeah, because it's the same principles across species, right?
It's a troubleshooting tool.
Yeah. It's a troubleshooting tool. It's a way to systematically assess what you need, what the most likely way to meet those needs are, and then test that hypothesis and see if what you're doing is actually helping you reach those goals. And that is applicable not just with an enrichment plan for an animal, but for everything. We have our mentees do that for their self-care. Like we give people the healthy mind platter and we're like, don't be prescriptive about the healthy mind platter. Don't just like robotically do everything, on this. Use this as your enrichment plan, but run it through an enrichment framework to figure out what you need and how to engage with this, right? And then we do that with continuing education. Like I can't tell you how many times people in Pet Pro ask us like, I want to take like 4 different courses and I can't afford them all. How do I choose? Or just a more vague than that, like I feel like I need more skills for my professional development. Like, how do I develop those skills? And my answer is always like, run it through an enrichment framework. What are your goals? What are your unmet needs? Which courses are most likely to help you reach those goals? How do you know? What are going to be your metrics to assess whether or not the course is actually helping you reach your goal? And I got to give Becky a shout out because she was the first person to actually ask if we could do it in real time in a session so I could help her and give her feedback on it. And she actually wrote it out and she like did the enrichment framework for her continuing education and she mapped it out, and at the end of it she had a very clear picture of what she needed to do next and what courses she needed to take and what stuff maybe wasn't as urgent or important as she thought it was. and recognizing when shinies were just shinies that she didn't need to be chasing. And I was so proud of her for being such a brave learner and doing that for like in an office hour so that other people in the program could benefit from watching her apply the enrichment framework to this new context. It was, yeah, big shout out to Becky.
Yeah. She brings me so much joy.
I know. Becky, we love you. I know you're listening to this podcast. I'm just going to tell you we love you so much. You can never leave.
But you have choice, control, and agency.
You have
So
choice,
we
control,
support
and
you.
agency. We support you, but you can never leave.
Um, and I think that was a beautiful demonstration that you don't always need more, you need the same in different contexts.
Mhm.
So, like when we practice the enrichment framework, I mean, I went to therapy and then my therapist walked me through the enrichment framework and I gave her a face and she's like, "Ugh, are you okay?" It's like, no, I'm really mad right now. And it's not about you. It's the fact that I do this for pets every single day, like multiple families a week. And like I couldn't put these connections together. Are you kidding me? What do you mean? And so I had a whole that was a whole thing and an
Yeah.
experience. And
I
I
feel
think
like that's all therapy is, right? It's just like therapists telling us stuff we already know, but applying it to us instead of to our clients or the pets or our students. And it's like, oh, right, 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 right.
turns out I'm not an exception to the rules. And so I didn't need more. I needed somebody to point out like you have these tools. You need
Hmm.
to maybe do them more often, but you don't need to add new tools necessarily into your toolbox. You maybe need to adjust the things. And I think it makes a huge difference to be able to say, "Oh yeah, yeah. I'm not like fresh to this world. I have a very robust learning history that I can pull from."
Hmm.
I hope. Some days it doesn't feel like that, but that's okay too.
Yeah, it's okay to have days where you just, feel like you're a newbie. And I mean, I think like it again, talking about generalization, like learning how to stop resisting pain and just accept it and breathe through it is something that I like one of my therapists helped me with chronic pain that I experience. And I feel like this is another application of that. Like, it's okay to have days where you feel like you're a noob. And instead of resisting that or beating yourself up about it, just breathe through it and just like let yourself have that moment, accept that you're having that moment. And the more that you accept it and let it happen, the sooner it'll pass and you can move on feeling competent and confident, right? So that's another example of generalizing a skill you already have. Breathe through it instead of resisting it, and it'll go away sooner, right? Let
I mean,
yourself feel your feelings.
oh, I don't know anything about that. It's like breath work is really important or something.
Almost. It's weird. It's almost
Hmm.
like pranayama is the basis of yoga, and like breath work is just the basis of so many different practices across time and cultures and history. It's almost like there's a reason for that or something.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that my therapist had me do was kind of along the healthy mind platter. I'm gonna pull this back to being a pet parent in
Yeah.
just a second. Was list the things that I was already doing that I think already did something for me. So like when you're not in the panic place, not the moment when you think you're gonna vomit over your dog, but when you're okay, list the things that you've already worked through or worked on and what skills you already have so that you have a frame of reference when maybe you are in a moment where you're finding it really hard to breathe and you're stressed and all of those things. Take a minute and just list the things that you have worked on. They can be the acute skills. So if you have worked on something like a flight cue, or you have worked on a really solid recall, or I don't know, a sit. I don't know what people work on these days.
Yeah.
If you've worked on those acute skills, those can be really helpful to think about. But when it came to working on Griffey's vet wrap, I needed to not necessarily think about those acute skills, like can you
Mhm.
stand while I feed you and touch you? That was all very helpful that he could do that because if he sat, it would have been a misery to get that vet wrap off. But it was like, can he wear a muzzle? I already knew yes. Can he eat off the ground with the muzzle? Yes, that is helpful. I already knew what the high value treats were. So I went to my fridge and I was able to pull out, I think I did 3 separate items, did a preference test side by side to see like what tickles your fancy right now, because
Right.
we're not playing around.
Right.
I
Right.
need you to think that this is great.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I use some of those, what we might consider more soft skills or life skills or lowercase, lower T training skills in those moments. So listing those out so that you know how you could apply them during a challenge can be incredibly helpful
Mhm.
instead of spiraling. You may also need to spiral. That might be
Yeah.
part of your breathe through process.
Right. Right. I mean, spiral first, then take care of whatever you need to take care of when you're done with the spiral. Yeah, I think that like the idea of inventorying what you have is another foundational skill that has broad applicability and can be generalized, right? Because that's what we do with the our needs being met checklist. We don't use that with every single client, but when we're feeling stuck in the mud or it's just really complicated or there's something that we're missing and we know we're missing it, but we don't know what it is, what do? We go back and inventory using that handout. And we do the same thing with like, I know we're missing something in Pet Pro. There's a piece of the curriculum that we're getting feedback over and over and over again. People keep asking us the same question. Let's look at our inventory of resources and figure out what's missing. So like that the ability to inventory is another foundational skill that can be generalized and do that here. Do that here. This is a good use of that skill of just sitting down and being like, what do I already have available to me? And a lot of times in the process of just sitting and writing it out, you see the thing, you're like, oh, that's it right there. I just found it. Just the act of like sitting down and listing it all out can be the thing. And I said writing, I want to have an accessibility moment. You don't have to write it, right? You can type it, you can dictate it into a voice to text translator, whatever works best for your brain and your body. I said write, but I meant inventory and you through whatever modality works best for you, right?
Inventory in a way that you can keep it for future use, I think is
Yes.
the important part, because you want to be able to pull it out when you're having a hard time. Like I've taught my
Yeah.
dogs so many things that I forget that I taught them just because it was fun or it was cute.
Mhm.
And things like as part of like a KPA chain, Nathan
Mhm.
taught her to hop on a platform and then hang her paws over and bow, and we called it the circus.
Cute.
And that is a skill set that was incredibly helpful that she had already had when we were doing some movement assessments to see what was ouchy.
Yeah.
So having the fact that we had that skill, it wasn't cute. It's not going to be some beautiful, like I can stand at the other end of the room and ask her to do it and she's going to do it. I don't need that. But the fact that we had the history of that movement pattern together meant that I was able to ask her and say, this is harder or the same as it was 3 or 4 years ago. Maybe
Mhm.
that gives us a clue into something that was happening. And if you're
Mhm.
like, I don't know what y'all are talking about, I've never taught my dog anything in my entire life, and obviously I don't do anything with my dog. You learning is always happening, so you have taught your dog a lot of things. You may just need an outside observer to say, like, here are the skills that I already see you demonstrating.
Mhm.
They may not feel like skills to you because they may just feel like how you live your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say that that is a really important thing when we're talking about like assessing when you need to add something to your toolbox, because there's this myth that like more is better. And there's a big kernel of truth in that myth, in that the more tools you have, the easier it is to be mentally flexible and be able to shift across, and like the more tools that kind of serve similar functions, the more like granular you're able to articulate what the subtle differences are with the different processes. So there's a big kernel of truth in that myth, but nevertheless, it is a myth that you need to just keep collecting tools and have the world's biggest toolbox, and the biggest toolbox wins the best pet parent or the best behavior professional or whatever. And that like I think what I think okay, so I'm gonna tell like brief little story about how I got to where I am that I talk about in Pet Pro all the time. Um, when I started working as a behavior professional, I was not in any way plugged into the dog training community. I was primarily focused on parrots, horses, and wildlife because that's where I had the most sort of hands-on opportunity. And yes, I did have dog clients. About 25% of my clients were dog people, but I was not in any way sort of connected to the dog training community. So by the time I got to the sanctuary where Ali and I met, I had a lot of experience with consulting. I had a lot of experience with training. I had a lot of experience with troubleshooting, but I had zero protocols from the dog training world. I didn't know who Leslie McDevitt was. I didn't know who Ken Ramirez was. I didn't know who like I didn't know any of the big names in dog training except Susan Friedman because she was one of my mentors, right? Um, so working at that sanctuary, we were able to reverse engineer all of the protocols that we needed because what I did have was a background in enrichment and I knew how to use an enrichment framework. So I was able to identify what the dog needed and what skills the dog needed to get to where they were and then figure it out from there. And so like the flight cue was not a modification of an existing protocol. It was a protocol that just so happens to be very similar to protocols that already exist. That's a good example of what I mean by that. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because if you have the foundational skills and you have them and you're really solid, you can create your own tools. When you identify that you need them, if you're starting with those foundational tools, you can create your own tools when you need them. But the only way to know that you need them is to be really solid with your foundational tools. Because that's how, if you have a really deep understanding of those tools and how to generalize them and how to utilize them, then you can recognize when something needs to be added to your toolbox. So I'm going to use myself as an example there because had no idea. I had never heard of any of those protocols that are so famous in the dog training world when I started at that sanctuary, but we got a lot done. We were highly effective because we knew the foundations really well.
I have a relatively similar experience. So I knew a couple of the protocols when I got into behavior consulting. I remember seeing your podcast episode on flight training, and I was like, yeah, Emily does birds. That makes sense. And then I saw this chatter about it, and I was like, what is happening? Well, I'm so confused because I thought you were talking about free flight training.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and then I learned that we were talking about the flight cue, what you just referenced. I'll put a episode in the show notes on the flight cue, which is essentially just teaching the pithy way to say it is teaching flight instead of fight.
Hmm.
It's more nuanced and complicated than that, but we're going to stick with that for the purposes here. And then I remember learning about what you were talking about, and I thought, but isn't that just this? And isn't it just this? And isn't it just this?
Hmm.
And I remember coming to you and you being like, yeah, you're right. And I was like, cool, cool. I wasn't necessarily missing something, but I think what is the takeaway as a pet parent for that is that what is important to look at is what you're doing, not what you necessarily think you should call it. So when I
Yes.
have somebody come to me and they're like, I have done all of these things with my dog, pet parent, pet professional, my own partner, myself, the answer isn't, okay, I'm going to take you at your word because I don't know what that means for you. Like there's so
Mhm.
many iterations of things. I have seen people who take an emergency U-turn. And when I talk about emergency U-turn, it is very specifically 180 degrees, get so many feet away, usually behind a barrier, and then find it. Like that
Mhm.
is the way that I kind of classify emergency U-turn. And that is not the way. There's no there's no rules here. So somebody
Yeah.
might be doing what I would label a flight cue when they are calling an emergency U-turn.
Right.
So when Emily talks about being able to inventory and look at the foundations and look at all of those things, it really comes down to what is actually happening, not what do we
Yes.
think we should call it, not what do we think this label is, not what do we think that we're doing. But if we were to
Mhm.
like video ourselves what is actually happening in space and time, because there are things that you may or may not need to adjust for those things. And that means when you know what you actually are doing, you probably have different skills that
Mm-hmm.
you can lean on outside of that context. So if I have somebody who's never heard of the flight cue, and for us, the flight cue again is teaching flight instead of fight. So not unlike what you talked about with Miley, where we see big feelings. Hey, Miley, come over here. She gets all wiggly and you celebrate. And then we see that, like, okay, maybe I don't need to be a bully to my housemate who I actually like. I don't know why I am the way that I am.
Hormones are hard, baby girl.
Hormones are very hard. When we have that context, if I have a client that comes to me and that is the sequence that they already have, what
Yeah.
I read into that is they have the skill to be able to call their dog under harder conditions. They have the skill to be able to read the dog's body language. So to see that there is tension, stress, conflict building, able to respond in real time, and then able to do a little bit of that de-escalation.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to steal some language, we may call it co-regulation,
Mm-hmm.
maybe social support, whatever we want to call it. But in that sequence, if a client came to me, I already know that they have body language skills. I know that they have body language skills both in what we would consider that, like, fight, flight, or freeze, and
Mm-hmm.
also in that de-escalation. I know
Mm-hmm.
that they have good conflict management skills and conflict mediation skills. I know that
Mm-hmm.
they have good timing. I
Mm-hmm.
know that if they came to me and said, and we're seeing a reduction, and now this is what we're seeing, they have good observation skills, and they
Mm-hmm.
also have the skills to identify patterns.
Yeah.
So while somebody may be like, I don't know, I've never taught my dog anything. If you came to me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to bet that I can find many skills that you already demonstrate that you can call upon when you have that hard time.
Yeah.
So pause, think about what is happening in reality, and then say, oh, maybe we do have some things in our toolbox already.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's why I was so reticent. I mean, I know you and Allie have been incredibly patient with me. But that's why I was so reticent to teach our protocols. And I even despite the fact that we had a lot of demand, I was like, y'all are focusing on the wrong thing. You don't need another protocol. You need to join Pet Pro so we can teach you how to do the foundation. um I was just having big feelings about teaching these protocols because it's like they are really like for the most part, there are just a lot of ways to achieve the same outcome with slight differences. And those slight differences can matter from case to case, from individual to individual. But the last thing y'all need is to just acquire another protocol. You need to learn the foundations so that you can make those slight adjustments on your own, no matter how many protocols you've actually learned, right? And so like and again, I am not opposed to people teaching protocols. I'm not That's not my point. I'm not saying don't ever take CE. CE is garbage. That's not the take home lesson here, friends. The lesson is do it through an enrichment framework. Figure out what you need. Figure out which of those courses is going to help you most likely to help you reach your goal and then assess whether or not the course has actually helped you reach your goal instead of being like I just need to collect as many protocols as I can, right? And I know I'm speaking more to the pros here, but I think that a little bit, I mean, we do see pet parents too who are like, I'm working with 14 different trainers on 14 different things because I want my dogs to have these skills and these skills. And it's like, okay, if you enjoy doing that, go for it, right? If that's your hobby, great.
Mhm.
But if you feel like you have to do this because you have to learn all of these things to support your dog, let's have a conversation about how we can make life way, way easier for you. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I had another client that uh incredible skill set, long history with dogs. This is a dog like she's never had before. And she was doing too much. Full stop. She was doing too much. She also would tell you she was doing too much. She came to me because she needed to do less. She was burning out. She was not having a good time. It was stressful. Couldn't handle it. So that first session was really what we talked about here. What skills are you already demonstrating together? Like, where are we seeing progress? What is benefiting you? What can we build into something greater for your ultimate long-term goals? What can we remove from this thing and maybe put on that like maintenance if we need to? And we were primarily working on separation anxiety. There was some resource guarding present in the home. That was one of those things that we were able to put under like it's improving through what you're already doing. That was relatively low maintenance. We really don't need to address that directly. We don't need to put it under that capital T training contingency right now. But for clients, we always want to give choice, agency, and control. So we always talk about what could be so that you have an idea of like what is possible within the realms of a future trajectory of this. And so I brought up trades because we have a trades protocol to teach dogs to be like, well, yes, you may have this thing. There's a whole visual that goes along with that that y'all can't see.
That you didn't see. It was delightful though. It reminded me of sort of like Elizabethan England, like courtly behavior. Yeah.
Yes. Because both my dogs, when I ask, can I has it, will kind of like back up and do a moderate play bow and tuck their heads. And so that's just the way that it looks to me. It's like a moderated curtsy. And her eyes lit up as I'm talking about this thing that we can work on in the future. Her eyes lit up and she's like, "Ooh, can we talk about that?" And she had already articulated she needed somebody to keep her on track. She needed somebody to make sure she wasn't doing too much. And I said, "Do you actually want to talk about that, or do you want me to put a barrier between you and this shiny that I see that you're excited about, but is not going to address your current problems?" And she goes, "Oh, I needed that." I was like, "I know, you already told me you needed that, so I can do that for you. Let me put it down here." Because there are things that we may want to work on in the future and we don't have to work on right now.
Yeah.
When we're already overwhelmed and this other thing is actually impacting our quality of life in a much more serious way.
Yeah. Can I tattle on us about the desensitization thing? Do we have time for that?
Sure.
Sweet. Okay, so both Ellen and I are nerds, and both of us learn about things from many sources, including textbooks. And also, both Ellen and I are at a stage in our career where we've forgotten a lot of the terminology because we just know how to do the things, and so we just don't pay attention to the terminology as much anymore. And if I don't even remember, I have no concept of time, but not too long ago, Ellen sends me this email, like mind blown email, like, did you know that a criterion for systematic desensitization is relaxation? And if it's just tolerance instead of relaxation, it's not systematic desensitization, it's exposure therapy. And I was like, what? Like, so we're just being mind blown with each other together. We're like, what? No. Like, we're just having these head explosions everywhere together. And so she went and verified it at a second source. I went back to one of my favorite textbooks on behavior analysis and verified it. And we're like, oh my God, we both learned this at some point in the past. And before it had any like relevance to us and what we were doing. So it didn't sink in. Like the relevance wasn't there to like let it sink into our brains and we would remember it. And we're just kind of sitting there like mind blown with each other. And I was like, this means that like we don't need relaxation protocols. We just need to learn how to do systematic desensitization correctly, because systematic desensitization is a relaxation protocol when it's done correctly. So most of the time in dog training, what we're calling systematic desensitization is actually exposure therapy, because we don't actually wait until the learner is fully relaxed before we increase the intensity of the stimulus. And it was just one of those moments where it's like, this is yet another example of how like you don't need more protocols. You just need to learn the foundations really well. Because if we had remembered that, if we knew that already, systematic desensitization is really the only relaxation protocol we need, right? Mind blown.
That was such a fun discovery. My
Really
brain
was.
felt so energized at that time.
Same. And it's a good reminder that like, even though we are both at the stage in our careers where we don't really need to pay as much attention to that stuff anymore, it's always good to go back and review the basics.
And I think part of it for both of us is like we don't use that language.
Yeah.
Because the language is evolving. And I would rather use language that is descriptive than provide false language to somebody.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm very intentional about not using a lot of that language when I'm talking to professionals and clients, because again, if you're it depends what field you're pulling from. So if you're pulling
Mhm.
from ABA versus CBT versus ethology versus sociobiology, all of us are we like to argue about language, and I don't need
Yeah.
to be involved in that.
Right.
So we talk about what is, and we can skirt around a lot of those things, but it also means that when people are not talking about what is, we can talk past each other a lot.
The biggest takeaway is that your existing skills, if you pause and reflect and apply them thoughtfully, are powerful tools in new scenarios. And more often than not, they're the only ones you need in most situations. You don't need new tools. You just need to repurpose tools you already have. So I think the takeaway, the take home point that you can take from this episode is before you buy the new toy or attend the next seminar or try a new protocol, pause and ask yourself, what do I already know that could work here? And if you get into the habit of that, I think you'll find that you already have an enormous amount of skills that will get you through most scenarios.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if there's someone in your life who also needs to hear this, be sure to text it to them right now. If you're a pet parent looking for more tips on enrichment, behavior modification, and finding harmony with your pet, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Pet Harmony Training. If you're a behavior training professional dedicated to enrichment for yourself, your clients, and their pets, check us out on TikTok and Instagram at Pet Harmony Pro. As always, links to everything we discussed in this episode are in the show notes. Thank you to Ellen Yoakum for editing this episode and making us sound good. Our intro music is from Penguin Music on Pixabay. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps more pet lovers and professionals find us so they can bring enrichment into their world too. Thank you for listening, and here's to harmony.
I worked in zookeeping. I love my Leatherman, which is a beautiful multi-tool. They got me through the majority of things that I needed to do in a regular day-to-day regular day-to-day. What?
This is the blooper for the end of the episode.
Okay, I'm gonna try again.
You got this. I have faith in you.
I loved my Leatherman that got me through most of the day-to-day stuff. There we go.